Feeling and sensing the support of the earth. And invite you to take some deeper breaths, and on the exhalation, releasing and relaxing any unnecessary tension or holding. And the areas behind the eyes, the
The
jaw,
jaw,
the arms
the
and
arms
hands.
and hands,
That which is bringing movement through the stillness of the body, sitting, resting here on the earth. And if the breath is a supportive anchor for your attention, being available to the breath, becoming intimate with the sensations of this body being breathed. receptive, available,
This view.
allowing the breath to bring you into presence. As the attention wanders away from the body, from the breath, as it does, in the moment of noticing, coming back to the body here and relaxing any tension that might have formed in the mind and the body through the process of thinking. And then becoming available again to the sensations of the body being breathed, the body resting here. Nothing to do but witness what's already happening. This body resting on the earth's body, this body being breathed without any effort. Each time we come back to the felt sense of the body breathing, we're practicing letting go. Letting go of that which is pulling us away from being here. Keeping the practice simple. Simply letting go of distraction and being available to the felt sense of the body being breathed, or of the body sitting here. we'll have about a 5-minute break signaled by a bell. Anyway, welcome again. And again, my name is Kirsten, and it's really a joy to be here in person. And also thank all of you who are online. I hope, oh, look, good. The sound's better. Great. And is the sound in here okay? Okay. Okay, excellent. All right. So I just came from teaching, facilitating a week of a really beautiful program. It's a Buddhist Eco Chaplaincy training program that I've been involved with since its inception now almost a decade ago. And uh, Gil Fronsdal is one of my co-conspirators, and I was talking to him last week, and I said, "Oh, I'm giving this Monday night talk. What do you think I should talk about?" And he said, "Well, talk about what's going on this week." And so I thought that I would. I thought I would share some of the origins, the motivations, the intentions of our eco chaplaincy training in light of this practice that we dedicate our hearts and minds to, of uh, training the heart and mind to be available, to be present, to have the capacity to hold the joy and the suffering of the world. So, one of the themes that we bring into our chaplaincy training is that of storytelling, kind of ancient human form of connection and communication. And so I thought I'd start with an origin story, a story about this program. And uh, it's interesting. It hadn't occurred to me, but where do you find the beginning of a story, really? It's kind of arbitrary. So I'm going to begin where I was finishing my PhD program in environmental sociology in Santa Cruz, at UC Santa Cruz. And uh, Gil Fronsdal, my teacher in this insight tradition, has a retreat center right outside Santa Cruz where I was spending a lot of time. And in one of my retreats, he asked, well, what are you going to do after you graduate? What's your plan? And I said, well, my plan has always been to combine these threads that have been so foundational in my life. And these threads have been the Dharma, and they've been deep nature connection practice. They've been around environmental justice and equity, and very much indebted to being a student of Joanna Macy's despair and empowerment work, the work that reconnects, which I'll maybe share a little bit more about. And at the time I had been teaching, I'd been working with college students, with young people for probably a good 10 years at that point. Teaching college courses and field courses and in the fields of environmental studies and particularly around water and justice and those themes. And I found that as I was offering this curriculum that was so heavy, I mean, just what's happening in our world in this sort of more than human landscape is it's really, it can be quite heartbreaking and devastating. Um, and I found that I would, you know, deliver these lectures or offer these discussions, and I would kind of walk home from the classroom, and my heart would be breaking. And then I'd see in my students, just increasing levels of cynicism and apathy and numbness and despair. And I was like, this is not working. Something is 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 not right here. And especially having this sort of backbone that I did of refuge in the Dharma and so much solace in um, Joanna's really beautiful teachings and my own kind of animist training. had this kind of extraordinary adolescence of being apprenticed by a druid. So that was very foundational for me. Um, so what I told Gil was, what I really want to do is bring all of this together and have this as an offering that can help those of us who are really invested in responding to the ecological challenges of our times. And he said, well, I have this Buddhist chaplaincy training program, and been really successful, and we've graduated so many people, and they're out in the world doing this chaplaincy work. And I've really always wanted to put together an environmental or an eco chaplaincy training program, but I haven't had time. Would you be willing or to take that on? And my heart just said yes, And I actually was not very familiar with what chaplaincy was at the time, but it sounded good. And so then we began, this this journey that was such an experiment, I think, for all of us. And I share this kind of origin story because it really was the beginning of something that continues to unfold in these really mysterious and beautiful and unanticipated ways. And there's been this question, this longstanding question of, well, what is eco chaplaincy, and what is it to chaplain each other, and what is the purpose of that in these times? Um, when I tell people that I run this Buddhist Eco Chaplaincy training program, you can imagine that the first question is like, well, what's that? And then I pause, and you know, I've never really developed a great elevator pitch. I think because it's such a dynamic and unfolding exploration. And in many ways, I want to name and give credit to Sarah V. Casey, who is a dear friend and colleague of mine, who also studied with Joanna Macy. And she she went through a divinity training, and she named herself as an eco chaplain. And she went to Appalachia, where she was supporting those who were on the front lines protesting the mountaintop removal. And she wasn't involved in the activist efforts. She was uh, showing up to offer spiritual support for those who were really devastated by what was happening and were really invested in preventing something that was very difficult to prevent from happening. So she really, I think, was a pioneer in this. And that's part of the flavor of how we present that work, is that that eco chaplains are showing up to provide spiritual support for those who are experiencing despair, anger, direct impacts of ecological disruption. And not only that, but we're also um, inviting these questions of how is it to provide that kind of support to um, the more than human realm as well. What is it to actually recognize our our levels of interbeing and reciprocity, and what does it look like to remember our kind of origin within this earth, and to um, show up for the trees, for the clear cuts, as much as we do for one another in these times. So you can imagine that that kind of developing that kind of training program has been beautiful, and an adventure and an experiment. And we're now in our fourth cohort, and it just feels like they're a year and a half. The program runs for a year and a half, and I'd say that every cohort, it just feels like things are getting richer and deeper, and more vulnerable and more responsive. And a couple of you were there supporting us, and at that time who are here in this room. And um, yeah, just it's been a really precious gift and opportunity. So I thought I would speak to a couple of the things, a couple more of the things that we work with in terms of thematic training and again what that means in terms of the Dharma, because one of the qualifications that we have for our participants is that they're practitioners and that they have um, a certain amount of retreat practice, of silent retreat practice. And the reason that we ask for that is because, as those of you who practice know, that as we um, sit with our own minds and hearts, we have to be open to what is coming up. And that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of fortitude, and it takes a lot of patience. And if we are actually developing our own capacity to be with the suffering, the challenges, the unpleasant, as well as the pleasant and the joy and the beauty, then we know that we're more prepared to be with that in others and in the world. So it really is our Dharma practice that equips us to be offering this kind of receptive, supportive service to the world. So every cohort, we ask them to develop their own definitions for what they think Buddhist Eco Chaplaincy is, and it kind of helps us refine our elevator pitches, I guess, as well. So I thought I would read a few of those. Um, Eco chaplains nurture a sense of connection and belonging to all living beings, tending to the capacities of our hearts to fully meet the loss, blessing, and sacred responsibility of being alive in our world at this time. Here's another one. An eco chaplain is one who listens with an open heart to all the natural world, from the smallest ant to human beings and on to the open sky, and seeks to accept all and, where possible, to transform suffering and harm into peace and goodness through the Dharma, ritual, love, and prayer. And then I'll read one more, which relates to what I'll talk about next. The Eco Chaplain meets the joys and sorrows of all beings of our times through the sacred work of listening. So the sacred work of listening. And I'm reminded of Mother Teresa being interviewed by Dan Rather, where uh, he asks her about prayer, and she says, "Well, I'm just listening." About, what she's doing when she prays. She says, "Well, I'm just listening." And says, "Well, what's God doing or saying?" And she says, "Well, he's just listening too." And if you don't understand that, then I have nothing more to share with you, or something like that. And that's really one of the core practices of this program, is learning how and deepening our capacity to listen. And I love the word available, and I use it a lot when I guide meditation. What is it to be available? And listening is that kind of form of availability. Availability, when we sit, we practice, we cultivate this being available to our experience, and as best we can with that open-heartedness. If we think about these two wings of the Dharma, of the insight and the compassion, and the necessity of both, to see clearly what's happening is that insight wing. And in order to be able to fully accept what we're seeing, to fully be receptive to it, then we need that open heart. We need the compassion. So that cultivation of the clarity and that open-heartedness is what we bring into this practice of listening deeply to each other. And there's something too about, I'll come back to listening in a minute. I realized I wanted to share one other piece, which is what our Eco Chaplain graduates end up doing with themselves, because that's another question people ask. Well, what do they actually do? And and again, it's just the breadth and depth is kind of astonishing. We have people who have actually founded nonprofit organizations to offer resilience work and to those who are working in institutions that are oriented around environmental issues. We have people who have shown up individually as chaplains in areas where people have lost homes to forest fires or to floods or to fires or floods. Um, we have people who have we've been asked by different organizations for eco chaplains, like the Rainforest Alliance asked us for someone who could actually show up to support, you know, the despair, the heartbreak of people who are engaged in these environmental efforts. And we've had people who have put art installations together for endangered or extinct species. We've had people who have put together grief rituals and people who are bringing people together to do deep nature connection work of like remembering our connection to this earth and all all the beings here. So those are just a few. I mean, it's really like this open palette, but you can kind of get a flavor of what it is that um, people are being trained in offering and empowered to offer is this um, capacity to be of service to those who are experiencing direct harm or a lot of emotional turmoil, and then these practices of reconnection of relationship, and they're all responses. You know, it's like by opening ourselves up in this way, we um, become available to a response of the heart. And what does that look like and feel like? Um, so for many people, it's different. So this last definition of the sacred work of listening, and again, this being one of like the crucial tools that eco chaplains engage with, and how radical I think it actually is. And I love that the word radical means, you know, from the roots. It's like this is you know what we're in some ways like um, you know born to do in this very innate, deep way is to um, to be available, to listen to ourselves, to listen to each other, and then see what is that wise response. Let's see. So coming back to being a college professor for those years was one of the most profound and simple things I started to realize and uncover was the gift of simply being available and present for my students. So, not needing to fix them, not needing to fix their despair, not needing to tell them that it was going to be okay, not needing to change my curriculum so much, but just create enough space that there were opportunities for them to share with one another. And it was kind of amazing, you know, what would come forth because there would be these young people who would talk about never wanting to have children because they didn't know the world, you know, that their children would be born into. And then others who had these incredible, you know, visions about what could be possible. And that sharing these feelings of grief, of loss, of anger, of inspiration actually started to, you could sense like bubbling up more of a capacity and engagement in the world. And since then, I've actually seen a number of sociological studies that have demonstrated the importance of community circles, listening circles, particularly the studies I've looked at have been for younger people, kind of the college age demographic, that this act of just being listened to can really not only mobilize people from a place of maybe cynicism or despair or apathy, but that there's ways in which um, the listening creates and cultivates a sense of community and belonging where other ways of being become possible, which is just, it's just so beautiful to actually know that that's, you know, being demonstrated in these empirical studies, because it's something that I've witnessed in my own communities, and then that our eco chaplains also can um, report back, you know, the change that can happen through this simple um, act of deep, compassionate listening. So I thought that we could actually practice together in one way. And because there's so many ways to listen. And there's this beautiful talk that Ruby Sales, this civil rights activist, gave, where she has this story of working with this really troubled young woman. And she just asks her this question: where does it hurt? That's the question she just asks. Where does it hurt? And it's in asking that question that this woman really melts and becomes, you know, receptive and vulnerable and open and more connected with herself and her heart. And so I thought that we could just all, you could humor me. I'll close my eyes too. Just take a moment and close our eyes. And if it helps, putting your hand on your body, on your heart, somewhere. And, you know, as you reflect on potentially areas of difficulty or challenge in your life, where does it hurt? And if you're able to access a felt sense in the body of where it hurts, what is it to attend to that, not with any need to fix or change or heal, but we just bring a loving, kind presence. Allow it to be as big or as small as it is. Allow it to change as it might. And as you're ready, you can transition. And just wanting to emphasize the simplicity of a practice like that. You know, so simple. And that's what we do here in this practice, is we simply meet ourselves, you know, all parts of ourselves. And then that's what we can bring into the world. Just simplicity of meeting each other. So that's the one practice. And then the second piece that I wanted to speak to is um, what I mentioned, this aspect of chaplaining not just our human family, but how do we show up with that simple, receptive care with the more than human world. And there's some more risk here. We're not as accustomed to believing or practicing communicating with those who are not humans. And it was one thing that became really clear to me when I was studying with this family of druids when I was back in high school. Plenty of stories there, you can imagine. But this kind of uncovering these capacities for communicating across species and across I'm going to say beyond species, really. And this recognition of kind of how impoverished it is to assume that we can really only communicate with one another, one another humans, I mean. This whole world of aliveness that we're part of. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that that language is in human speak, but what are the ways that we can open and take that kind of leap of faith to really engage with the more than human kin and be part of that larger family. So that's something that we also work with, that we play with in our Eco Chaplaincy training. And it's something that, is just woven through indigenous cultures and knowledges, and they've so generously, in many ways, taught us these ways of understanding ourselves as kin in a more than human way. So I know I've shared this story a number of times, so maybe even in talks I've given here before, I'm not sure, from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's a Potawatomi teacher, scholar, biology professor, and she asks her students, do you love nature? And they all raise their hand, and then she asks, well, does nature love you? And only one person or something raises their hand, and she points to that as a way in which we've lacked this sense of reciprocity with the natural world and what's possible, this birthright of being kin in this way, and how it is that we can be humble and learn from those beyond our own species. She actually writes, Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, we can't meaningfully proceed with healing, with restoration, without restoration. Our relationship with land cannot heal until we hear its stories. But who will tell them? Our relationship with land cannot heal until we hear its stories, but who will tell them? And I feel so, indebted, like, to this time where um, kind of anything was possible when I was an adolescent. So it was like I was told that red-tailed hawks were sharing messages, as were stones and creeks and all sorts of things. And well, why not? Okay, why not? The world was feeling like a pretty troubling place, and I was fairly misanthropic at the time, and so it was life-saving to be able to dip into the mystery and magic of what could be possible here. And so what is it to hear the land's stories? There's this children's book that maybe some of you are familiar with by Byrd Baylor and Peter Parnell. Does anyone know that book? It's called The Other Way to Listen. Oh, it's, if any of you have kids or grandkids, highly recommend it. It's beautiful. And it's this man who's teaching, you don't know if he's a grandfather or what, but he's teaching this young child um, about how to listen. And he tells them, when you know the other way to listen, you can hear the wildflower seed bursting open. You hear rocks murmuring and hills singing, and it seems like the most natural thing in the world. Of course, it takes a lot of practice, and you can't be in a hurry. Most people never hear these things at all. So, so how is it, to open up that curiosity? And from where do we listen, and how, and what does it mean, and what does it look like, and what does it feel like for each of us? Those are answers that I'm not going to answer and I can't answer, but such a fundamental practice in our training, and something that I think is so fundamental to being alive, and particularly in these times when we need all of the wisdom we can have access to be able to respond wisely and lovingly. So maybe I'll just share, one more story. And again, I may have shared this before. These are a couple of the stories I love that really bring me so much inspiration. And it's another colleague of mine who's also an Indigenous elder, goes by the name of Four Arrows, and also a sociology professor, actually. And he would, he's not teaching anymore, but when he was, he would ask all of his college students to, on the first day, to go out and hug a tree, and say, okay, first thing, like, go out and hug a tree. And they would do it, and then they'd come back and say, okay, well, now I want you to go out and ask the tree for permission first, and then go and hug the tree. And, um, I wasn't there for this, but he told me that, the difference was palpable in when the students would come back, just that invitation of, they would even laugh at him when he would say that. Of course, you can imagine, like, okay, I'm going to go ask for permission, but being invited into relationship is what's happening there. We're being invited into relationship, and that's what we're doing when we're opening ourselves up to listening, when we're opening ourselves up to being in communication and being in relationship with this more than human world is really what I think will save us, you know, is to know that we're embedded and that we belong and that we're part of a larger family of things. And I had a moment when I was reflecting on this talk, like, oh, is there enough Dharma in this talk? You know? But I think it's all Dharma, actually. I really do. And there's the practices that we're engaged in, which are so deeply indebted to that cultivation of wisdom and compassion and deep listening and being in relationship with. And then there's the way in which, what is it to engage in a world from that place of interconnection, from that place where the sense of self gets softened and um, everything matters. So those are some of my words about Eco Chaplaincy, and it was a very inspiring week. And I will end with one poem that is by Judy Brown, and it's called Fire. And I'm reading it because to me it really speaks to this art of listening. So, what makes a fire burn is space between the logs, a breathing space. Too much of a good thing. Too many logs packed in too tight can douse the flames almost as surely as a pail of water would. So, building fires requires attention to the spaces in between as much as to the wood. When we are able to build open spaces in the same way we have learned to pile on the logs, then we can see how it is fuel and absence of the fuel together that make fire possible. We only need to lay a log lightly from time to time. A fire grows simply because the space is there, with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way. Just sit for a moment together and then I'll ring the bell. Thank you for your very kind attention. And we do have time for questions, reflections. So, very happy to take those. I mean, I can hear you, but I don't know.
I'm Merle. I really needed to hear that.
Hmm.
I don't want to go deep into it, but something had happened before I came, and I just loved your talk because I always remember the magic. And lately I've been forgetting that. So I'm trying to make it to this trip, and something came up before I got here online about this trip, and it was just kind of a jab. And so I was thinking about what you were saying about being a chaplain, and I have these, and also, caring about the environment. I do have these ideas that some people don't know about, except, people who've been really close to me, about digging these gemstones that I dig. And it has to do with some indigenous people in Nevada. And so it hasn't actually manifested, but it's always been the plan from day one. And some of the things that I've run into as a female doing this in Nevada is a lot of males seem to get up on my website and it's intensely kind of negative towards me. But when you were talking about being a chaplain, I was thinking to myself, I don't quite understand, even with, Buddhism, the part of how to not be impressionable. Somehow when people are suffering, even if they're coming at me in even an angry way, I understand anger. I've felt things. I understand pain and suffering. I've had it. And so, instead of me maybe holding space for these things, even my children suffering, I seem to sink. And so I was kind of wondering, everything was the reason why I was just talking about all of the above is because you just touched on so much that I was like, wow, this is, I'm still open to the miracle here. I see that we all are here on a planet. It's spinning in the universe. I mean, that in itself says it's just absolute magic. So I know that things are created in God's likeness, or and that anything is possible, right? So I really love that. But anyways, back to just kind of wanting to fulfill my end of whatever it is I feel that I could do here, but not getting so sunk in by it and I just seem to take it on, and I really still have not figured out how to do what a chaplain would do, and so I was just like to hear some of that. Thank you.
Y- Thanks so much for that question. It's a really important one. And I think that a lot of it is about um, never forgetting the the importance of caring for this self, you know. So what is it to maintain that care and responsibility for this one first? And then we can open ourselves and be available. But, it's like uh, my um, friend, colleague, Dharma teacher, Kyra Jewel Lingo, actually, I heard her just very recently responding to a question like this. And she said, it's like putting on a coat when you go outside in the cold. It's like if you need some kind of way to keep yourself from being so porous and vulnerable as a way to keep yourself warm, then you do that. You have a boundary of kindness. And to prevent a sense of overwhelm or getting inundated, that's healthy, that's wise. And then when we have that capacity to be in our own truth and our own groundedness and be open and available to another, then it won't, rock us so much. But that's definitely part of this practice of chaplaincy, is learning that, learning um, how to have those kinds of healthy boundaries and know when you have the resource and when you don't. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems to be a theme that I've been told, and I think just a quick example is I'd seen a friend about 6 weeks ago at Briar Patch, and she has lymphoma now. And so last night I was like finally like I should stop by and say hi to Danielle. And to be honest, she's gonna die soon, and she chose not to do radiation and chemo. And so she's in this small apartment, and I'm sitting there, and I didn't think that she would be as bad off as she was last night. And so it's a perfect example. I did hold space, but it did really affect me. So I don't know if when somebody said to me once that came here in a sit, said, you're a vata in Ayurvedic. I can tell by your hands, and so you're extremely sensitive, and you would be prone if you were having a hard time doing anxiety. So you should protect yourself. And so what do I go to the sensitive island and stay there? So I guess I'm still a little, I understand it, but I mean, I would just have to isolate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is really practice. This is a practice. And so, um, there's this sensitivity to your own resourcefulness and your own capacity to be there. And then there's also, you know, the uh, the story of this Zen priest wanderer who, it was someone asked him, what does he have to, defend himself in his travels, and he said, "Oh, all I have is my love. That's all I have." And so there's that too. How do we actually, this is a practice of cultivating that capacity, so it's not um there's no problem with being where we're at. And it's just being really sensitive and kind to ourselves where we're at, and then continuing to practice. So it's all learning. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, we have another question in the hall.
Um, Hello. Okay. Um, how, what steps can we further engagement with eco chaplaincy?
Well, it's a good question. We're in the process of, this sounds so lofty, but you'll blame it on Gil, not on me, but he wants to develop an association, an Eco Chaplaincy association. So we're actually working, we have like a website and a lot of resources in design. We're designing a website with lots of resources. And certainly we have a lot of alumni now. So there's definitely people out there and the program. And we also don't lay claim to the title Eco Chaplain or Eco Chaplaincy. There's actually quite a bit now. Like Upaya has a chaplaincy program that has an eco chaplaincy component, and I know that there's like I think that it and some maybe Harvard Divinity School has sort of an eco chaplaincy training. So it's definitely becoming more available, and that's very exciting. And yeah, yeah,
Well, I know that IMC has a chaplaincy program.
that's right.
And so is this part of the chaplaincy program? One?
They're
as-
two different
They
programs.
are, okay,
That's right.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah. Is it okay that we're overlooking the Zoom folks? Is there anyone on
Great
Zoom?
question. Are there any questions on Zoom? Okay, because we have another question in the hall, so I think we'll go ahead. Say your name.
Hi, I'm Douglas. So one of the teachings of the Buddha and in Buddhism is about impermanence. And, you know, I've watched the world change around me during my lifetime. And sometimes I get conflicted with my ideas of how I want the world to be and how it is. And, you know, I can envision, you know, this paradise on heaven on earth. And then as a human being, I see my participation in unhealthy activities. And that's where the conflict occurs right there. And how does Eco Chaplaincy address that sort of conflict?
So the conflict, let me make sure that I'm following you, is this difference between how you want to behave and how you find yourself behaving, or does it?
Like simply driving my car over
Right.
here.
Right. Yes, yes, I know. Yeah, I mean, I think that you're putting your finger on something really important and the kind of contradictions of living a human life and the impact, especially with all of the kind of global commodity chains that we're embedded in, that we can't extricate ourselves from. So I don't think I have an answer for you, but I do think that there's something actually beautiful about being attuned to our impact and then being able to at least make choices that cause perhaps as little harm as possible. But to to know like that this it's larger than us. The institutions we're embedded in, it's larger than our own individual agency. And that's a conundrum. I mean, I don't have an answer for that except to say that I think it's important that we're aware of it and are attuned to the causes of harm and ways to mitigate our own harm in the world. Yeah, I don't know how helpful that is, but it's a great.
Not much. You know, being attuned to it, I think is important,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and then we can at least weigh our choices.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks. I know we're almost at time, and there is a question in the Zoom room, though. Oh, should I take it or should we move on? Yeah? Okay, Karen.
Hi, Kirsten. Thank you so much for your talk this evening. I have a question for you. I'm going to try to make this quick because I know we're short on time, but am someone who has spent my life in the world of conservation as a conservation biologist, and have I'm at a place in the arc of my career where I'm ready to be done with the where I am. I've been in agency work for a long time, and I am both someone who is suffering a lot of pain over the conditions of our world and need chaplaincy. I need a
Mhm.
chaplain, but I can't express to you how stunning it was, I guess, to me to show up tonight. It was sort of a last minute decision to be here and to hear your talk. It just
Mm.
moved me in a way that it's difficult for me to express, and if I try, I'll cry. So um,
Aw.
I just wonder if you would say something about the value in undertaking the chaplaincy program for someone who I feel that this is maybe a direction that would be um, good for me to think about moving toward. But at the same time, I'm in a lot of pain, and so I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, well, I think that everyone who ends up in our program is meant to be there, that there's very much a sort of inclination to join even when people don't even fully understand what it is. Um, but I'll also say that we have a support network. It's on our website that you can reach out and actually get connected with an eco chaplain. And that might just be a nice way to experience being chaplained and get a sense of whether it also feels like a program or something that you would appreciate participating in from that end as well. But that could be a good start. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. I think announce. Should we do the
Can you say out loud what your website is?
Yeah, mm. If you look up Buddhist Eco Chaplaincy in any search engine, you will get the website. It's the only Buddhist Eco Chaplaincy thing out there. And right across the top is a banner that has the network where you can actually get hooked up with an eco chaplain.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you offer metta and then
Oh, you'll do that first.
I'll
Okay.
hop
Yes.
up and do announcements after you.
Perfect. Yes. I couldn't remember the order. So, um, yeah, let's drop into the space of the heart. I know that I personally am just so grateful to be here with you all in person, and those of you on Zoom, thank you. And I'm just feeling into that sweetness of being in community. And may any goodness from our time together, any insight, any heart opening, any curiosity, may it be of benefit to all beings everywhere, and that all beings everywhere be free from suffering, and that they know peacefulness, ease, and a true sense of belonging in the world.